This is a story, perhaps the greatest, most tragic, and most explosive story ever told. And like all great stories, it begins with just two characters. They are not kings, they are not gods. They are, perhaps, you and I, seen through the strange, cracked lens of history. To understand this book, this manifesto, you must first understand them. You must feel what they felt. The world you and I know was born from their collision, from their struggle, from the blood and the fire and the hope they represent. The first character enters the stage like a force of nature, an earthquake. Marx and Engels call them the bourgeoisie, but do not think of them as simple villains in silk hats stroking fat cats. That is a cartoon. The reality is far more terrifying, and far more magnificent. Marx himself, the man who would dedicate his life to their overthrow, speaks of them with a kind of breathless, terrible awe. He calls them the most revolutionary force in human history. And he was right. To understand them, you must first imagine the world before them. Imagine a world of silence, a world ruled by the past, a world of kings who ruled by divine right, of priests who held the keys to heaven, of aristocrats who owned the land because their great-great-grandfather had. Your life was decided the moment you were born. You were a farmer because your father was a farmer. You lived and died in the same village. Your world was small, bound by tradition, and veiled in what Marx called religious illusions. It was a world of stability. And then they came. They were not warriors with swords. They were merchants with ledger books. They were inventors with strange new schematics. They were believers in one new, terrifying God. Profit. And in the name of this God, they did what no army of knights could ever do. They tore the old world down. They ripped the sacred veils away. They told the king his divine right was nonsense. They told the priest his power was an illusion. The only thing that was real, they said, was the cold, hard reality of the cash nexus, the exchange of money. They didn't care about your family name. They only cared if you could produce. This new class, this bourgeoisie, unleashed a storm of creation. They built cities that swallowed the countryside. They laid down iron rails that bound continents together, shrinking the globe. They built ships that crossed oceans not in months, but in weeks. They summoned steam and electricity and the telegraph. In just 100 years, Marx writes, they created more massive and more colossal productive forces than have all preceding generations together. Think about that. More than the pyramids, more than the Roman aqueducts, more than all the cathedrals of Europe. They didn't just change how we work. They changed how we think. They changed the very air we breathe. They dissolved everything that was old. They erased borders. They dragged every nation, kicking and screaming, into a single global marketplace. The clothes you wear, the coffee you drink, the ideas in your head, they were all pulled into this great, swirling vortex of capital. Everything, they said, has a price. Your honor, it has a price. Your love, it has a price. Your art, it has a price. Everything solid, everything sacred, melted into air. They were titans. They were giants. They were the architects of the modern world. They were, in their own way, magnificent. But a force of nature does not care what it crushes. An earthquake does not grieve for the village it flattens. And to build this new world, this vast, glittering machine of production, the bourgeoisie needed fuel. They needed a new kind of fuel. They needed people. Millions of them. And this brings us to our second character, the hero, or perhaps the victim of our story. They are called the Proletariat, but again, do not think of a cartoon. Do not think of a muscular hero raising a flag. Think instead of a man. Let us give him a life. Perhaps he was a weaver in a small village. He had pride. He owned his own loom, a wooden machine passed down from his father. His hands were calloused, yes, but they were skilled. He knew the feel of the thread. He knew the rhythm of the work. He chose when to start and when to stop. When the sun was high, he would rest. When his child was sick, he would stay home. The cloth he wove, it was his. He would take it to the local market. The money he earned felt heavy and real in his hand. It was a hard life, yes, but it was a life of dignity. It was a human life. Then, the machine arrived. The new bourgeois factory in the city, miles away. A factory with a steam engine, a monstrous heart of iron and fire. A factory that could weave more cloth in 1 hour than our weaver could in a month. Suddenly, his skill, his beautiful, practiced, human skill, was worthless. The cloth he made was too expensive. No one would buy it. He was ruined. He and thousands like him, the shoemaker, the blacksmith, the farmer whose common lands were fenced off. They are all ruined. They have nothing left to sell. Nothing, except themselves. They have no land. They have no tools. They have only their hands and the hours of their day. So they come to the city, and here they find the second character has become a monster. The factory is not just a building. It is a new kind of hell. The whistle screams at 5 in the morning, a sound that rips you from sleep. Inside, the noise is deafening, the air thick with cotton dust that coats your lungs. And the machine? The machine is now your master. This is the part that Marx saw, the part that broke his heart and filled him with rage. He called it alienation. It is the most important, most human, most tragic idea in the entire book. It happens in 4 stages. First, our weaver is alienated from the product of his labor. He stands for 14 hours making cloth, but the cloth is not his. It is whisked away. He makes thousands of yards of it, but he himself wears rags. He creates wealth for someone else. He is a stranger to the very things he creates. Second, and this is the deepest cut, he is alienated from the act of labor itself. His work is no longer creative. He is not a weaver. He is machine tender number 7. His job is to pull a lever, to tie a knot, to push a cart. The same motion, every second, every minute, every hour, for 14 hours. The work does not use his mind. In fact, it demands he not use his mind. It demands he become part of the machine, an appendage of flesh and bone bolted onto the iron. The work doesn't fulfill him. It empties him. He no longer feels human at work. He only feels human when he is away from it, when he is eating or sleeping. His humanity, his creative spark, is something he must check at the factory gate just to survive. Third, he is alienated from himself. What makes us human? Marx asks. We are creative beings. We see a future and we build it. We imagine and we create. But this factory work, it reduces him to an animal. He is trapped in the present, surviving 1 second at a time. He is no longer a creator. He is a tool. He is a thing. He is a proletarian, a word from ancient Rome meaning one who possesses nothing but his children. He is a resource to be used up and discarded. And finally, he is alienated from other human beings. The man standing next to him is not his friend. He is his rival. If our weaver faints from exhaustion, that man will take his job, because that man also has a family starving at home. The factory owner is not a person. He is a walking symbol of capital, a distant force who demands more speed, less pay. The only connection between people is no longer community or love or loyalty. It is only the cash nexus. How much are you worth per hour? 20 cents? 15? You are a number, a cost, a line in a ledger. This is the tragedy of the proletariat. It is not just poverty. It is not just long hours. It is the spiritual death. It is the hollowing out of the human soul. Now we have our two characters on the stage. The bourgeoisie, the magnificent, world-changing creators, and the proletariat, the hollowed-out, spiritually murdered fuel for their great machine. The stage is set. But Marx, our writer, sees a fatal flaw in the plot. He sees an irony. The bourgeoisie, in their relentless, brilliant pursuit of profit, have made a terrible miscalculation. They thought they were just hiring hands. They didn't realize they were creating a new class. They thought they were just building factories. They didn't realize they were building schools. Schools for revolution. Think about it. When our weaver was alone in his village, his misery was his own. He was isolated. But in the factory, he is standing next to 10,000 other people, all living the same hell. They breathe the same foul air. They curse the same screaming whistle. They hate the same master. And for the first time, they begin to talk. The factory, the very tool of their oppression, becomes the tool of their liberation. They learn to organize. They form unions. They realize their shared power. And then, Marx points out, the second flaw. The system itself is insane. It creates crises of overproduction, a madness. Suddenly, the factory closes because it made too much cloth. The warehouses are full, And so our weaver is thrown onto the street. He is now starving because there is too much of everything. He is homeless because too many houses were built. He sees his children go hungry, not because of a famine, not because of a bad harvest, but because of a flaw in the logic of profit. This is the moment the play turns. This is the moment the victim realizes his power. The bourgeoisie, Marx writes, in creating this vast industrial world, has done something amazing. It has proven that humanity can conquer nature. We can produce enough for everyone. The problem is no longer scarcity. The problem is distribution. The problem is the logic of the system itself. And so, Marx delivers his terrible, earth-shattering prophecy. The bourgeoisie, the great revolutionaries, their story is over. They have played their part. They built the modern world. But in doing so, they created the very class that will now destroy them. The weapons with which the bourgeoisie felled feudalism to the ground, Marx writes, are now turned against the bourgeoisie itself. But they didn't just forge the weapons. It has also called into existence the men who are to wield those weapons. The modern working class. The proletarians. They are the gravediggers of this system. They are the children of the bourgeoisie's own creation, now grown up and coming to claim their inheritance. The final curtain of this first act is not a question. It is a declaration. The bourgeoisie created this world, but they cannot control it. Their fall, Marx thunders, and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. So, the stage is set. We have our two great characters, the magnificent, world-changing bourgeoisie and the vast, hollowed-out proletariat, the human fuel for the machine. The tension is unbearable. The tragedy is complete. And now a third figure steps from the shadows. Who is this figure? This communist? Is it a boogeyman? A foreign agent? A shadowy conspirator with a bomb? Whispering treason in the dark. This is the image his enemies painted. This is the image we have been taught to fear. But Marx, in Part 2, turns on the lights, and he asks you to look again. He asks you to look in the mirror. Because, he says, the communist is not a stranger. The communist is not them. The communist is you. The moment you stop just feeling the pain of the factory and start understanding the system that built it, the communist is simply the proletarian who has, as he puts it, the advantage of clearly understanding the line of march, the conditions, and the ultimate general results of this great historical struggle. They are not a separate party. They are just the part of the working class that has seen the whole map. They are the ones who understand that the suffering of the weaver in Manchester is the same suffering as the miner in Silesia, and the child laborer in Lyon. They are the ones who understand that the fight is not just for one factory or one wage. The fight is for the entire system. And what is their goal? What is this Kikban Kuokuk Noiluan, this script of the rebellion? Marx makes it perfectly clear. The immediate aim is simple. Organize the proletariat, overthrow the bourgeoisie, and seize political power. Take control of the state. But that is just the first step. The ultimate goal is to create a new world. And to do that, they must face the accusations. They must answer the charges leveled against them by a terrified, hysterical world. And it is here, in this Q&A section, that the heart of the manifesto beats loudest. The first accusation, the great, primal fear, is hurled at them. You communists, you want to abolish private property. You can almost hear the gasp in the 19th century parlor. You can feel the fear. They are coming for your home. They are coming for your family farm. They are coming for the small shop you built with your own sweat. They are coming for the few precious things that make your life yours. But Marx does not flinch. Instead, he leans in, and his voice is filled with a cold, righteous anger. Property? He asks. Which property are you talking about? Are you talking about the property of the small artisan? The property of the peasant? The small, hard-earned property that a person creates with their own two hands? He laughs. Capitalism has already abolished that. The industrial machine, the great corporation, the bank, that is what destroyed your small shop. That is what took your small farm. He says you are defending an illusion. 90% of you already have no property. In our world, he says, property, real, productive property, already does not exist for the vast majority. It exists only for the few, because it does not exist for the many. No, he says, listen closely. We are not talking about personal property. We are not coming for the clothes on your back or the photograph of your mother. We are talking about bourgeois property. We are talking about capital. And what is capital? Is it a thing? Is it a pile of gold? No, he says. It is a social power. It is a force. It is the power to use the labor of others, to create more capital, to buy more machines, to exploit more labor. It is a vampire. It is a ghost that only lives by sucking the living. Capital is not a personal possession. It is a collective product. It can only be set in motion by the united action of all of society. So, he asks, when we demand that capital be converted into common property belonging to all, what are we really doing? We are not taking your personal property. We are simply changing the social character of that property. We are taking away its power to enslave others. We are taking the vampire's fangs. We are saying that one man should no longer have the power to buy the entire lifetime of 1,000 other men. That is the property we want to abolish. The property that is defined by the power to exploit. The accusation comes again, this time more desperate. But if you abolish private property, you will abolish the family. You will destroy our most sacred bonds. You will tear children from their mothers. You will introduce a community of women. The moral outrage is deafening. And here, Marx's anger truly boils over. It is not the hot anger of a brawler. It is the cold, precise fury of a surgeon. The family, he asks. Which family are you so desperately trying to save? Are you talking about the bourgeois family? The one that is, in almost every case, a financial arrangement? A merger of two fortunes? A contract for the procreation of heirs? A world where the wife is, for all intents and purposes, just the chief instrument of production for the family line? Is that the sacred bond you mean? Or, he continues, his voice dropping to a whisper, are you talking about the proletarian family? He asks you to walk with him into the factories of Manchester. What family is left when the father is in the factory for 14 hours? What family is left when the mother is in the mine for 12 hours, crawling on her hands and knees? What family is left when the child, 6 years old, 7 years old, is chained to a machine to clean it because his hands are small enough to fit? Where is the sacred bond? Then, he thunders. You, capitalism, you are the ones who have destroyed the family. You have torn it to shreds. You have reduced the most sacred human relationships to a simple, brutal cash nexus. You have made the child an article of commerce, a tool to be used up and discarded. That, he says, that is the family we want to abolish. We want to stop the exploitation of children by their own parents. We want to rescue education from the influence of the ruling class. We want to give children childhood. We want to give families time. And as for your disgusting accusation about a community of women, he says, just look around you. Your entire system is built on a community of women. The bourgeois man is not content with his wife. He seduces the wives of his friends. He pays for prostitutes, and, most despicably, he takes his own workers, their daughters, their wives, as his right. That is your community of women, born of hypocrisy and power. We, We want to abolish this. We want to create a world where a woman is not an instrument of production. A world where she is simply a person. And finally, the last desperate cry. You will destroy our country, our nation, our culture, our homeland. You are rootless. You have no loyalty. And Marx's answer is perhaps his most famous and his most brutal. The working men have no country. Let that sink in. What does he mean? Does he not feel the pull of language, of culture, of home? He means this. Look at your life. Is the factory owner who starves you, who shares your language but not your life, is he more your countryman than the weaver in France, or the miner in Germany, who is suffering the exact same starvation under the exact same system? He says no. He says capital has no flag. Capital is global. The banker in London works with the factory owner in Paris to exploit workers in both countries. So why? Why should the workers be divided by a border? Why should you, the German worker, go to war to kill the French worker, all for the profit and glory of your master, who is partners with his master? He says no. The real division, the only division that matters, is not between German and French. It is not between black and white. It is between those who work and those who profit from that work. The bourgeoisie uses nationalism as a tool to keep you divided, to make you hate the wrong enemy. Our country, he says, is our class. Our loyalty is to each other. Your brotherhood is not defined by a map. It is defined by your shared chains. And so, what is the plan? What happens the day after the revolution? Here, Marx stops being a prophet and becomes an engineer. He lists 10 points. A to-do list for the new proletariat government. And listen. Listen to how radical this was in 1848. 1. Abolition of property in land. 2. A heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. 3. Abolition of all right of inheritance. 4. A national bank, centralizing all credit in the hands of the state. 5. Centralization of all communication and transport. 6. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. 7. Equal liability of all to labor. 8. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. 9. Free education for all children in public schools. 10. Abolition of children's factory labor in its present form. Think about that. How many of these ideas, which were so terrifying, so communist in 1848, are now the accepted bedrock of almost every modern civilized capitalist society? The progressive income tax, free public education, child labor laws, central banks. This wasn't just a fantasy. This was a blueprint, a script for a new world. And what is the final scene of this script? What is the ultimate goal? It is not a new tyranny. It is not a new set of masters. The goal, he writes, the ultimate vision, is an association. A world where the old class society, with all its misery and its hatred, is finally swept away. A world where, for the first time in human history, the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. But now that the script has been written, the rebellion planned, a strange noise is heard. It is the sound of other voices, other scripts. Because when an idea is as powerful as this one, when it speaks to a pain so deep, it does not exist in a vacuum. It is immediately surrounded by echoes, by distortions, by imitations. And it is here, in this often forgotten third part, that Marx and Engels become ruthless. Before they can fight the enemy in front of them, the bourgeoisie, they must first clear the stage of all the false friends standing beside them. All the other socialists who are offering the people the wrong medicine, the wrong dreams. As a writer, I understand this. The most dangerous enemy is not the one who says you are wrong, but the one who says, I agree with you, and then changes the meaning of every word you say. First, Marx points to the reactionaries, the ghosts, and the most pathetic of these is feudal socialism. Picture this: a duke, an aristocrat. His lands have been taken. His castle is crumbling. His titles mean nothing. He hates the bourgeoisie. He hates this new world of factories and stock markets. Why? Because it is ugly? Because it is cruel? No. He hates it because he is no longer the master. So what does this deposed king do? He sees the suffering of the new working class, and he has an idea. He will pretend to be their friend. He holds up his old aristocratic banner and says, "Look, the old world was better. When I was your master, at least I cared for you. Now, you are just slaves to money." He cries crocodile tears for the worker, all to win them over, to fight his battle. Marx's critique is savage. He says these aristocrats are not looking to the future. They are trying to drag everyone backward, into the past. They are offering not liberation, but a new, gentler set of chains. They want to be the patriarch again. Marx calls their ideology half lament, half lampoon. It is the sound of a bitter old man cursing the present because he can no longer control it. Then, there is another tragic figure. The petty bourgeois socialist. Who is this? This is the small shopkeeper. This is the artisan. This is the small farmer. This is the very man we mourned in Part 1. The man crushed by the great factory. And he sees the horrors of capitalism perfectly. He knows the alienation. He knows the pain of being made irrelevant. He is perhaps the most eloquent critic of all. He sees the miserable consequences of machinery, the concentration of capital, the overproduction. He sees it all. But what is his solution? What is his dream? It is to go back, to turn back the clock. He dreams of a world, of small workshops, of family farms, of medieval guilds. He doesn't want to seize the future. He wants to restore the past. And here, Marx is both sympathetic and ruthless. He understands the impulse. It is human. It is born of real pain. But it is cowardly. It is trying to stop an earthquake. It is, he says, both reactionary and utopian. It is a fantasy. History does not move backward. And then, Marx turns his fire on his own people, the Germans, the true socialists. These were the philosophers, the academics, the university men. They sat in their studies, and they read the passionate, fiery pamphlets coming out of France. And they improved them. They took the brutal, bloody, hungry language of the French workers, and they translated it. They translated it into the vague, complex, philosophical jargon of German philosophy. So, instead of the struggle for a living wage, they wrote about the alienation of the human essence. Instead of the fight against the factory owner, they wrote about the confrontation with the universal. They took a weapon, and they turned it into a textbook. Marx's contempt is absolute. He says they neutered the revolution. They were afraid of the dirt. They were afraid of the fight. They took a battle cry and turned it into a pedant's robe. They forgot that the problem was not an abstract man, but a real, starving, living man. Next, Marx points to a new enemy. This one is perhaps the most dangerous of all. Not the ghosts of the past, but the doctors of the present. He calls them conservative or bourgeois socialists. Who are these people? They are the good ones. They are the philanthropists, the humanitarians, the charity organizers. They are the politicians who pass small reforms. They are the factory owners who build a slightly cleaner dormitory. They are the economists who write books about ethical capitalism or conscious consumption. They look at the world and they agree. Yes, poverty is dreadful. Yes, the suffering of the working class is a problem. And what is their solution? Their solution is to fix capitalism, to manage the suffering, to treat the symptoms. They want to pass a law here, start a charity there. They want to tame the beast. They want, Marx says, they want the world of the bourgeoisie, but without the proletariat's struggle. They want the wealth, but without the misery. They want the system, but without its inevitable, brutal consequences. And Marx says, this is the most insidious lie of all. Because they are not trying to end the system. They are trying to save it. They are the ones who make the chains just a little more comfortable, a little more polished, so that you will never, ever think of breaking them. They are the managers of your oppression. And finally, Marx turns to the last group, and here his tone changes. It is not anger, it is not contempt. It is a profound, respectful, and tragic sadness. He calls them the critical utopian socialists. These were the originals. They were the dreamers, men like Saint-Simon, Fourier, Robert Owen. These were the giants. They were the first to look at this new, monstrous world and say, "No, we can do better." They were the first to dare to dream of a different future. They didn't just critique, they built. They drew up fantastic, beautiful blueprints for new worlds. They imagined phalansteres, palaces of communal living. And one, Robert Owen, a factory owner himself, he actually tried. He built a town called New Harmony. He paid his workers good wages. He built free schools for their children. He proved that you did not have to be a monster to run a factory. Marx and Engels loved these men. They called their writings the most valuable materials for the enlightenment of the working class. But there is a great, tragic but. Their dreams were beautiful, but they were just dreams. Why? Because they were too early. They were writing at a time when the proletariat was still just a scattered, unformed, miserable crowd. It was not yet a class. It was not yet a force. It had no sense of its own power. And so, because the workers had no power, who did these utopians appeal to? They appealed to the rich. They appealed to the bourgeoisie. They appealed to the humanity of the factory owners. They wrote letters to kings. They truly, naively believed that they could persuade the masters to give up their power, just by showing them a more rational, more moral system. They believed they could build a small, perfect model, and the whole greedy, brutal world would just copy them out of the goodness of its heart. They were, Marx says, dreaming. And because they believed in gentle persuasion, they were against all political action. They were against strikes. They were against struggle. They were against revolution. And so, Marx must do the hardest thing. He must honor these prophets as the men who started the dream. And then, he must walk past them. He must say, "Your beautiful dreams are now a distraction." History is not a gentle, rational debate. History is not a classroom. History is a fight. It is a struggle of power. And now, after clearing the stage of all these other scripts, the ghosts of the past, the doctors of the present, and the beautiful dreamers of the future, there is only one script left. The one built not on nostalgia, not on reform, not on dreams, but on struggle. And so, we come to the end. The final part. The theories have been laid bare. The false friends have been dismissed. The stage is set. The script is written. And now, there is only one thing left to do. Act. This is the moment the ink becomes blood. This is the moment the idea leaves the philosopher's study and walks onto the cobblestone streets filled with gunpowder and hope. This is part 4. This is the sound of the fuse being lit. This is not a grand theory. It is a guide to the dirty, dangerous human business of revolution. It is practical. It is street smart. It is a how-to guide for a world on fire. Marx and Engels look out at the map of Europe, and they see a tinderbox, and they are holding the match. But they are not fools. They are not fanatics who believe one plan fits all. They are strategists. They understand that the fight in every country is different. It wears a different mask. It speaks a different language. In France, they say, join the Social Democrats. Fight alongside them against the conservative bourgeoisie. Even if you don't agree with them on everything, fight with them against the common enemy. But, and this is the key, while you fight alongside them, you must never stop criticizing their half measures. You must never let them forget the real goal. Then they look to Poland, and their voice softens. Poland, a country that doesn't even exist on the map. A country carved up, partitioned, swallowed by Russia, by Prussia, by Austria. A people without a home. And what do the communists say? They say, in Poland, we support the party that insists on an agrarian revolution. They support national liberation. They understand a simple human truth. You cannot ask a man to fight for his class if he is not even allowed to fight for his country. You cannot tell a man to worry about the factory when his language is outlawed, when his home is occupied. The freedom to exist comes first. But, and the whisper returns, they support this national revolution only as the prelude to the real revolution that must come after. But the true genius, the coldest, most brilliant, most human gamble, is reserved for Germany, their homeland. Germany is a mess. It's not a country. It's a collection of fractured kingdoms ruled by petty kings and feudal aristocrats. It is backward. It is stuck in the past. The bourgeoisie, the enemy from part 1, is also trying to have a revolution. They are trying to overthrow the king, to create a modern, unified capitalist Germany. So, what do you do? What do you do when your enemy is fighting your other enemy? And here, Marx lays down the most dangerous game of all. He says, you fight with them. You, the worker, will stand shoulder to shoulder with the factory owner. You will bleed and you will die to help the man who exploits you win his revolution. Why? Why would you do this? Because the king is the past. The bourgeoisie is the present. And you You must clear the board before you can play the final move. You help the bourgeoisie win because their victory is the fastest way to your own. You help them build their world, knowing that the very instant they have built it, the very day after their victory, your cannons will be turned on them. It is a terrifying, cold-blooded, and deeply human strategy. It is the strategy of patience. It is the strategy of seeing 2 steps ahead. Support every single revolutionary movement. Fight alongside anyone who is fighting the existing social and political order. But, and this is the soul of the entire book. This is the non-negotiable. In every movement, in every alliance, in every speech, in every whisper, you must never stop. You must never be silent about the one question that matters, the central question, the property question. You never, ever let your allies forget that this is ultimately a fight about who owns the world. And now, we're at the end. The strategy is set. The alliances are understood. The stage is dark. And Marx and Engels, these 2 young men, hunted, poor, and angry, step into the final spotlight. And they are done hiding. They are done with secret societies. They are done with whispering in shadows. The time for theory is over. The time for politeness is over. The time for compromise is over. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. Do you hear that? Disdain. They are not just unwilling. They find it contemptible to hide. This is not a debate. This is not a request. This is a declaration. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. There it is. The single sentence that would make this little book the most dangerous book in the world. They are not asking, they are telling. They are not suggesting reform. They are demanding everything. This is the point of no return. This is the sound of the gauntlet being thrown. And then, the final, terrible, magnificent threat. The threat that would echo through every palace, every bank, every boardroom for the next 200 years. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution. Tremble. What an image. He is telling them, the fear you feel is real. The spectre we spoke of is now at your door. And why should they tremble? Because of the most famous line in the entire text. The line that explains everything. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. Think. Think about that. That is the engine of the entire rebellion. When you have driven a man, a woman, a class so low that the only thing they possess is their suffering, When you have taken their dignity, their time, their health, their hope, what do they have left to fear? You cannot threaten a man who has nothing. You cannot scare a class whose only possession is chains. They have nothing, nothing to lose. And then the final promise, the promise that would light a fire in the hearts of millions, the promise that would topple empires. They have a world to win. From nothing to everything. From chains to the world. That is the bargain of the revolution. And so, with the threat made and the promise given, there is only one thing left to say. The final instruction. The two words that would bind all of these scattered, broken, alienated people into a single, global, historical force. The two words that would cross oceans and languages and generations. The two words that would become the most famous and most feared slogan in human history. So working men of all countries, unite!